I'm fine. I'm fine.
Is it rainy and gross where you are?
It's kind of gross. Yeah. We're getting into like a couple of days of gross. Oh, well. But it's the last day of April. Thank fucking God. Excuse my language. This has been such a long month. So I'm raising my coffee to you so we can cheer it away. It's been hard. Yeah. How are you in Brooklyn?
It's been a long month. I'm not in Brooklyn.
Where are you? Are you upstate?
I'm in Rochester, New York, accidentally.
Oh.
Yeah. It was, my child had a spring break, so we came for 3 days. And pandemic.
And now it's been how long? 5 weeks? How long has it been?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
6 weeks.
Oh, wow. Well, at least you have more open space.
Yeah. I mean, he likes to like pull weeds and be outside, but like at the same time, you know, missing city life, which.
Yes, I'm sure. Well, that's a beautiful painting or whatever that is behind you. I can't tell.
It's felt. Isn't it cool? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's awesome. Yeah. That's great. Well, I am so happy to share my time with you today, and I wanted to tell people how we met. Hi, Susan Laney. Because we met on the plane back from South by Southwest one year. And it was one of those funny moments where, like, I think there was an empty seat between us, and I'm just, like, so tired from this whole experience in Austin. I just want to go to sleep. And, you know, there's this lovely person next to me, and we, like, kind of say hi. And I'm thinking, all right, I'm done for the day. And then we just end up talking the whole time. And turned out we both lived in Brooklyn, had, you know, sons similar age, and you just had the most interesting career. So I would love for you to tell people how you got to Etsy. I keep saying the wrong company.
No, it's okay.
Please tell us how you got to Etsy.
They're very similar, but not. So I'm a lawyer, but I'm also primarily an artist. I love art. I've been making art since I was really young, and I chose my law school based on its art program. So I wanted to get my master in fine arts at the same time as my law degree. I'm a meth. I make jewelry. That wasn't going to happen, apparently. So then I just was really interested in art. And after law school, I couldn't find a job. And I eventually got a job in a law firm. And I really wasn't doing what I was set out to do, which was help artists eventually. So I found out about Etsy. I started selling my jewelry on Etsy. And then I noticed some of their policies seemed a little strange from a legal perspective. So I wrote to them. They wrote me back. We had a call. I spoke with their CEO and founder, Rob Kalin. And then I flew myself to Brooklyn, and I told them that they were going to hire me as their first lawyer. And they did. And so I was at Etsy for 9 years.
And this was when Etsy was how old?
I think around a year old. I was the 17th employee.
Right.
It was like early day startup time when you like go buy your own desk on Craigslist. I brought my own laptop to work. You know, I didn't have a desk or a chair. I was like in the kitchen, like sitting on a random couch that who knows where this couch came from. It's pretty gross. Right.
So, and what year was this?
2007.
2007. Yeah, very early startup times. So could you have imagined what Etsy ended up becoming?
No.
And I don't mean that as a question to like put down Etsy, but you know, you were there, you saw the first glimpses of it. No one really knew what a creative e-commerce economy was going to look like back then.
I don't think so. No one really knew what it was going to look like. But, you know, I really believed in the mission, and this was early times. Like we had to do everything from scratch. Like you couldn't just open up your own store and sell your art online. And now there are lots of ways to do that. So I think that Etsy was really innovative back in the day, and it was a matter of making sure that we scaled in a culturally aligned way and a business way. So I'm not allowed to tell.
No, of course. I mean, but it's fascinating because, you know, I worked down the street from Etsy headquarters, and you and I, like, you invited me to your, what was it? Like, you guys had these incredible lunches they were so amazing. And it was just kind of like the norm, right? It was like a weekly thing. And this is when startup life was, you get all your free meals, you have all these perks. But it was kind of cool to see a creative company do that, and, to be able to thrive and grow. And then I think after you left Etsy, they moved yet again to that, massive space. And it's just really phenomenal to see what that's like. And I'm sure most people have purchased something on Etsy, right? It's giving the power of the creative, it's giving the entrepreneurs a platform to be able to sell something and show their work that, would have been much harder before.
And test out the market and just see how it goes. And I was there for like a hot second for the new building. It was one of those things where I knew I got a new job and I knew I was leaving. Like I was there for 9 years. That was a long time.
Right. Yeah.
But I thought to myself, I need to at least experience this building because it was so much fun. So much fun.
It was gorgeous. And so your background as you never stopped making jewelry and creating things. So, that was a really beautiful way of aligning both of your interests. And I'd love to talk further at another point about what you're doing yourself to kind of continue doing your, fulfilling your artistic flow. But for now, I'd love to talk, because you're a lawyer and you have the background in helping to support creative people through kind of very, basic structures, like through the legal system and just making sure that operations are set up correctly. How are you seeing life in COVID-19 affecting these, individual makers, creators, entrepreneurs? Because what I've seen is that a lot of the small businesses, right, are being shut out through things like the PPP. And, I'd love to hear your insights on that.
I worry. I think that it's really hard to be a small business owner in general. I think that there are a lot of unknowns, and it's hard to not have, the support system that maybe larger companies have financially and emotionally and just, experience-wise. But I also believe in the power of small business and being flexible and being able to pivot. I mean, look what you've done. Look what a lot of companies have done. I think that once we uncurl ourselves from the fetal position and wipe away the tears and put on our sweatpants, we can use the tools that are out there to thrive. And I want to believe that this is going to, we're in sort of a period of being like an ugly teenager, and maybe we're going to blossom into someone cute, maybe this is the time that we kind of needed in our lives, and it's going to be better. But right now it's hard. The PPP, I think, I want to believe that wasn't the intent, that it was going to get closed out immediately, and that these publicly traded companies were going to swoop in and get all the funds. Mm-hmm. But now that I say it out loud, of course, what I mean? But it's hard. Yeah.
So if you were, if one person was, a small business owner, an entrepreneur, a creative person, a maker, and, not necessarily on Artsy, but just out there in the world doing his or her thing, do you have any words of advice for the best way to move forward, to set themselves in a stronger position?
I mean, it's basically the same advice that I would give any maker, no matter what, is just to differentiate yourself from the competition, put yourself out there, market yourself as much as you can, be genuine to your beliefs and your aesthetic, and keep moving forward. And you can glance at your competition, but keep moving forward. And if there is a way to take advantage of the scenario that we're in right now, maybe try. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Look what I have a small company right now. We pivoted to Zoom. We're doing online stuff. I think that there are ways to keep eyeballs on you and to change.
Well, so then let's pivot. Let's talk about the fourth floor. So you started this organization, this company, and it's just been immensely interesting to watch it. And at first, like, it was kind of at the same time when you and I both went off on our own, and I don't know if that was like if the timing was serendipitous or if just a lot of women were starting to go out on their own. It was probably both. But tell us more about the fourth floor, because I think it could be a huge resource for a lot of people.
Yeah, well, thank you. So I've been the only woman in a boardroom a lot. And I know a lot of women who want to be on boards and don't know how to get that first board seat. Traditionally, when you think of people on boards, you think of like white men, ex-CEOs, venture capitalists, but really, like anything, diversity brings so many benefits, including money. Like, look at all of these case studies about how diverse companies do better. Period. Yeah. End of sentence. And at the same time, there are these smaller companies that have a really hard time raising money. These smaller women-owned companies. There are tons of studies about that. So the concept of the fourth floor is to bring together that these executive women who have risen up in their careers, have the networks, have the expertise, and want to be on a board, and these smaller women-owned companies who could use some of this expertise. And when you bring them together and put them, if you put a woman on a smaller board, she's going to give back. She's going to really help this company thrive. And then she can use that to leverage it into a board seat at a bigger company. So it's like an ecosystem that's good for both sides of the equation, good for the smaller businesses that are trying to grow a board, and good for the executives who want a board seat.
Do you have any examples of stories that have come out of the fourth floor?
Yeah. So my favorite example isn't as much a board seat, but it's the power of networking and sort of being in the room. We have a legal twist at the fourth floor because I'm an in-house attorney. And if you want something done at a company, if you can find the in-house attorney, they know all the players. They know who to talk to. Like, you're kind of at the top, and they can figure out the priorities and how to get it done. So anyway, the example that I love is there is this small business. It's called Spot On, and it's an Uber for pets. So if you have a pet and you need to go to the vet or something like that, or take for wherever, it has trained drivers and all the safety stuff for the pets. And through the fourth floor, Spot On was in contact with Petco and the chief legal officer of Petco. And you can imagine how when we put them together and they started chatting with each other, a deal was done, and this really helped scale the company. And so, you know, we say that there are a lot of ways that you can be involved in companies, and we see this as more of a quote unquote sponsorship. So it's basically saying a company's name when you're not in the room, and helping to get a deal done. So that is an example of like this tiny company was able to scale because of the network.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. That's so great. Yeah. So for those who are watching and want to learn more about the fourth floor, what's the best way for them to get information?
So we have a website. It's a thing. Thefourthfloor.co. It's all words. Thefourthfloor.co. And we have events, and we have online events. And then we have this thing that we call Board Boot Camp, which is where we talk about what a board can do for a small business, and then how an executive could leverage their skills and think about what kind of board seat they want. And we did it in person, and the first time we did it in person, it sold out. And then we're going to do it in person again, and then you know what happened.
Right.
So we did it virtually, and it sold out again. So
that's fantastic.
You know, it's like one of those things. You just
Yeah. And now, I mean, because before the events were, you know, physical events for the most part that people would go to. So are you finding that people are coming in from places outside of New York City?
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. We've been doing members only happy hours every week. We have educational content. We're actually doing a talk today with Aon Insurance, talking about like what kind of insurance benefits for health and happiness is for your companies. We've been doing at least one or two events a week, and our following has grown because people are able to just like zip in, zip out, like whether you're in New York or California or LA or London.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and it's something like we had thought to ourselves, you know, how are we going to scale this company if we're going to be doing in-person events? Yeah. And this is how.
It just forced you to figure it out, and out of necessity, and you needed, you know, the whole Zoom economy now and Zoom functioning. I think it's really interesting because, you know, so many so many companies over the last couple of years, right, have faced criticism over not having enough diversity on their boards. And it resulted in several large, like Fortune 500 companies. I think it was Goldman even, right? Like some of them said, we are going to have diverse boards. Yeah. Like we will commit to having that happen. Now, when that happens, though, I mean, we see all these benefits, but how do you, like, I guess my question is, like, how do you prevent the notion of like tokenism in a boardroom, right? If you're the only woman, you're there as the woman, or if you're the only Asian person, I mean, the work has to continue. Do you guys ever talk about that?
We do. I really dislike having, being the one woman in the room. I don't think that's diversity at all. I mean, and as being the one woman in a room many, many, many times, I just feel the eyeballs on me. Even if something as simple as, there was this one time that's like in my brain where it was really hot in the room and there was no more water, and it was clear someone needed to open a window. And I could just feel the eyeballs on me. I could just feel it. And I just thought to myself, no. And I was hot too. I wish, I was like, and it's, anyway, that's a long
So everyone just like remained hot and nobody wanted to open the window. No one wanted to be the assistant or the secretary to
Yeah. And I refused. I mean, and I didn't come out and say, hey, everyone, I know we're all hot, but I'm not going to be your mom or the secretary, because I deserve a seat at this table just as much as you do. And you all have working arms to like open a window. I know this, but I've seen all of you people who can do it. And anyway, that's just a long way around saying, I think it's good that we're having these conversations, but it's not enough to have one in the room. It's not. It's not. And that's why I think us at the fourth floor, we don't want there to ever be a question of, is there a pipeline issue? And because I want to believe there is not a pipeline issue. There are plenty of qualified board members out there. But a lot of times people say to get a board seat, you need to have a board seat.
Right.
And so get a board seat at a smaller company that could really use you.
Yeah, I agree. So for those who are joining just now, this is Sarah Feingold, my friend, a lawyer, Etsy's first general counsel, and also a designer and artist herself. And we're talking about her company, her organization, The Fourth Floor, which helps connect entrepreneurs and women in business and corporate lawyers, just excellent women overall, and helping people find seats on boards. And one thing I read the other day that really upset me was how in the time of this pandemic, and with homeschooling, a lot of women in academia have had, but they have, this isn't scientific, there isn't like, data that's been solidified, but there's anecdotally, it has shown that there are women in academia are submitting papers in less frequency than they were the previous year or the year before. And this was in the Times, and so there were interviews with some of these women in academia, and they said, I'm not making as much money as my spouse, and I have children, so everything is on the back burner because I need to take care of my kids. I need to homeschool them, and my husband's job is taking priority because he's bringing in the income. And honestly, like, that's affected me, and that's affected many women I know. And it's not like to place blame on the other spouse, but it's just, we don't have these structures, these financial supports right now for families to be able to move forward. And, I know that's academia, but I'm sure that transcends and translates into business, into all sorts of different industries. So my fear is that coming out of this pandemic, we're going to see a little bit of a setback with these gender dynamics. And I don't know if that's something you guys have seen or are talking about. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I agree with you. I think that there's been a lot of studies showing that the pandemic has harmed women more than it's harmed men. And I think that all of equality starts in the home. It starts with childcare. And it's super hard to try to have a business and to try to have a marriage and to try to have a child and to try to homeschool that child, let alone 2 children or 3 children by yourselves, right? I mean, it's hard. I don't know what the future is going to be, but I hope that we can push for it to be more equal. And it's scary. So I haven't been researching any of this. I only know like what I've read as well. But it's frustrating for sure.
Yeah. And it's true. My friend Sophie put in the notes in the comments, she said, and yes, thank you, Sophie. There seems to be a trend that men are publishing at a greater frequency than women during this time. And, you think about academia as an industry where publishing is everything, right? Like the more you get out there, the more that you get published, that's like really all they look at for the most part. And so these careers are being set back by at least a year, probably 2. And it just becomes like you kind of, I don't know, I bet some of them are just going to hit some point of inertia, where they're like, this is too hard. This is like academia in itself is hard. And now I just, we don't have the resources for me to like sit down and write a paper all day and do my research.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I read a study a long time ago about parental leave. And they found that, if a woman gives birth and then takes parental leave, she's like healing, trying to like deal with this squirmy little thing. And that, sometimes men use that time to get some help and to, move forward with their careers, So there's just layers and layers of inequality, and it's frustrating, but the only thing that we can really do is try to like push forward as much as we can.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. Well, we have 6 minutes. So if anyone... Yeah, no, it is. I mean, the other, I'll bring up another thing that made me upset during this time, but we have 5 minutes now. So if anyone has questions or comments that you want to put in here, please feel free. This is Sarah Feingold. She's just smart, and we're here advocating for women and women in business and women on boards, getting women on these boards. But, one thing that has also struck out at me, since we're talking about gender, is how when face masks were first starting to be made in the home, and I've mentioned this in one of my earlier chats, but there, many people were making face masks at home and donating them to hospitals or centers that might need them. And there was a women of color artist that I know out in the West Coast, and she was very happy to make them. And but then she couldn't help but remark that she felt that this type of free manual work was always going to, be expected from women of color, and it really struck me because at first, we're all just so grateful for all of this work and volunteerism. But then, if you're a woman of color and you've already been, expected to work at like a very low cost or almost free, it kind of bites. It feels, it's very difficult to swallow that, especially when, like there's a crisis, so we all need to pitch in. But then to come out of that and feel that there's going to be an equitable playing field, and whether that's going to happen or not, I think that's very difficult. So, I have a lot of concerns over how we're going to emerge. I mean, not just with like, large businesses versus small businesses, but the gender equality and the roles expected.
Well, I mean, it was one of those things where, I was thinking to myself, should I even bother like pushing forward our mission of getting women on boards? Like, should I even bother? Like, what's the point? Like this, like the world is so terrible. Like, women are making masks and raising their kids. And then I realized that this stuff starts at the top. Like if we can get more women in places of power and places of money, in places to make a difference. Yeah. Can you imagine? Like, I mean, there's been studies showing.
I'm going to heart this. I can't heart this, but I want to heart this.
Right. If we can get more women in places of power and places of money, can you imagine what could happen moving forward? So, like, thinking about women on boards is extraordinarily important right now.
Women on boards is definitely important, especially if you think about the, how it translates to women in power and women in government, right? And who are the people who have in power who have dealt with the pandemic in the best way? It's been the female leaders. And as a Taiwanese American, I have to say that Tsai Ing-wen, the president of Taiwan, she gets no credit because Taiwan has like no diplomatic relations at all with most countries due to the tensions with China. But she has done a tremendous job, and she's not doing it for ego. She's not doing it for, yes, and the leader in New Zealand, there are multiple, right? But women leaders are bringing in like a common sense and a sympathy, empathy, compassion, and also just like really good data, really good, scientists, right? Really good infrastructure. And so countries like New Zealand, granted it's much smaller than the United States, but countries like Taiwan, where it's densely packed, right? It's like New York City, if you've ever been. There have been 6 deaths, I believe. And, the relationship between China and Taiwan, in terms of people coming through, is tremendous, right? But they have managed to do an excellent job, and it starts with leadership. So
yeah,
I think you guys at the Fourth Floor should definitely continue.
Yes, no, we are. It was just one of those things where when you're worried about every single thing, you think, well, why should I be pushing for diversity? Why should we be pushing for women at the top, like women on boards? Like, we're basically dealing with a lot of privilege right here. But then we came back down after being completely traumatized and triggered, and we thought to ourselves, no, this is exactly why we're doing it.
Yeah, can you imagine if our world had no women in leadership? I mean, that would, I wouldn't want to like raise my kids in that world. I think it's kind of frightening. Well, I mean, we have 1 more minute, and I just this has been such a great conversation, and I encourage everyone to learn more about the Fourth Floor and about Sarah's work. But I guess one thing that I've noticed, and just as this is a huge conversation too, but one thing I've noticed, since you're a lawyer and I want to ask you about, is how important contracts are going to be going forward, because I was on this webinar yesterday at the Boston Globe, held with the leaders of the Boston Ballet, Boston Symphony, Huntington Theater, all the performing arts programs, and they were talking about how much contracts have to be revised and the liability that they're going to be facing as they start letting people enter their spaces. Any thoughts on that?
So many thoughts. I mean, I think a lot of people, especially creatives, are afraid of contracts. Even when I was in law school and in art school, and I was talking with some of my artist friends, they're like, I don't need a contract. But I think today, it really just sets expectations, right? It says this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing, and if you don't meeting of the minds, then everything goes to crap. So. My thought is that contracts have always been important, and they're going to be even more important now. One of my favorite clauses is so nerdy. One of my favorite clauses of a contract was always the force majeure clause, which is always and if there is an act of God or an alien invasion or all these things that could happen. And I've read some pretty crazy force majeure clauses, and I'm on these newsletters of lawyers talking about all sorts of contract stuff regarding the pandemic. And the question was, can we get out of our contract in the pandemic? Let's look at the force majeure clause. And some of them would have virus in there, and some of them would say act of God, and say is the pandemic an act of God? Does that fit into the force majeure contract? So that's so is that the interpretation? What?
But that's the thing. I've never understood the act of God, language, right? I mean, how do you interpret that?
Yeah. And I think what you'd have to do is look at case law and look at what's common in the industry, and then probably fight with your insurance carrier a little bit if you're getting denied. But I think that's just a long way of saying that these contracts are really important, and thinking them through and thinking about liability and thinking, if you're going to have an event and you're going to invite people to the event and you're going to do everything that you can to keep everyone safe, what if someone's not safe? And that's always been the case. It's just a different layer thinking about the pandemic.
Yeah. Wow. I could hear you and people like Yayoi talk about this for a long time. Maybe we need to convene you guys, because I think it's a big thing. And, these large arts organizations have in-house counsel, and they have people to advise on that. But, art galleries, artists, people putting on events of their own. I do think everyone's going to need to be a little bit more prepared legally, and to know where to go. I know there's like volunteer lawyers for the arts in New York, and there are resources, but the more information, I think, the better as people evolve out of this.
And having the conversation is the first start, right? And just thinking about these things. But there are a lot of resources out there, and there are a lot of lawyers that would be happy to help think it through, and it doesn't necessarily have to be very expensive. Like, it could just be, if you get the right lawyer and ask the right question, it doesn't have to be like a crazy price. It's when you get the wrong lawyer and are like spending a lot of time doing research and all this stuff, that's when it just might not be worth it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I am so appreciative of your time, and this has been fun. It went by really fast, and I hope you come back to Brooklyn soon, but Rochester, maybe it's not so bad right now.
It keeps snowing. I just want to put that out. I just want to say it's April, and I would like open the window in the morning, and then there's like snow.
It's crazy. Well, I know tomorrow's May 1st, so let's hope it's gonna turn into bright and sunnier days coming forward.
And you're the only person I've ever met on an airplane, so.
No, seriously, I've actually had conversations with other people on airplanes, and then I regret all of those conversations because like I should have just slept, But yes, I loved meeting you on that airplane, and I love that we continue to be friends, and I hope to see you soon. So everyone, thank you. And this will be up on the stories for 24 hours, and then I will archive it on YouTube. And tomorrow morning is Brett Littman, the director of the Noguchi Museum. So we'll have a really good conversation about that. And I thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.